For over a century, scientists around the world have been studying and evaluating the effects of human activity on our climate. Since the 1970s, there's been a global evidence-supported scientific consensus that excess greenhouse gas emitted from human activity is the primary driver of climate change. Organizations are making net zero promises because they realize the detrimental impacts climate change will have on their operations and society at large. These net zero targets are meant to signal to investors, the public at large, and other stakeholders that a company is serious about combating climate change. In this segment, we will unpack the term net zero and what it means for businesses. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, net zero emissions are achieved when anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere are balanced by anthropogenic removals over a specific period. Put simply, net zero is a state in which human-caused greenhouse gas emissions are matched by our removals within a set time frame. The term net zero or carbon neutral are often used interchangeably, but they do not mean the same thing. Net zero emissions refer to all greenhouse gases and include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and CFCs. Net zero also covers all scopes, meaning it includes both direct emissions from a company's operations and indirect emissions from its value chains. When companies, governments, or other organizations promise to reach net zero by 2050, they are saying that when you add up all the greenhouse gases they produce in 2050, these emissions will be offset by climate-positive activities that remove these greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. For companies, this means reducing all the greenhouse gas emissions by over 90% and capturing or removing the rest. Over 1,300 of the largest companies globally have set net zero targets. Studies show that most organizations do not have a credible transition plan to achieve this goal. This is why a trust but verify approach to net zero plans should be a common practice. Achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions for a business requires the following steps. Assessing the current state of emissions across all operations, also known as greenhouse gas inventory. Setting a clear, time-bound target in line with scientific guidelines. Most credible targets usually include short, medium, and long-term targets. Creating and implementing an emissions reduction strategy and roadmap. For example, increasing energy efficiency, rethinking business models, and transitioning to renewable energy sources. And finally, when emissions have been reduced to the absolute minimum, the remaining emissions must be dealt with by investing in greenhouse gas removal projects. For example, carbon capture or afforestation. Such offsets must be chosen carefully to ensure their credibility and impacts. Companies face increasing pressure to set net zero targets. As large corporations embark on this journey, this will have a ripple effect on their supply chains upstream and downstream, indirectly putting pressure on smaller businesses. Drivers of success will lie in the organizational ability to innovate, collaborate, and maintain effective governance around a net zero transition.